Okay, so we are now starting the third of three videos in the lecture series on the endocrine system. And we'll start with gland number 6, which are the adrenal glands. You have two of these, one on top of each of your kidneys. And each of the two glands have two different parts. The adrenal medulla, the middle portion of the gland, is actually controlled by the nervous system. This produces the hormones that we refer to as epinephrine and norepinephrine. Now, epinephrine is also known as adrenaline, and adrenaline is the ultimate fight or flight response hormone. It uh, raises your heart rate, raises your respiratory rate, stimulates your muscle response. You're ready to fight or fly. Um, and this happens very, very quickly because, again, it's controlled by the nervous system. Um, the adrenal cortex is controlled by the adrenocorticotropic hormone from the anterior pituitary. Remember, we talked about that in the previous video, but it produces cortisol and a various number of different kinds of corticoids. These are steroid hormones that are anti-inflammatory in nature. You may have heard of, an athlete, for example, getting a cortisone shot, or maybe even just somebody who's been injured somewhere, or has swelling in a knee or a joint or a muscle or that kind of thing. And the reason they get these injections or medications is because that helps to reduce the swelling in the affected areas. The adrenal cortex produces these hormones naturally inside your body. All right, so the adrenal medulla and the cortex. Now, we've talked about the pancreas before because we've talked about it as an exocrine gland, one that produces and secretes digestive juices. Remember, the enzymes that the pancreas produces are dumped directly into the top of the small intestine. They help to reduce the acidity of the stuff coming out of the stomach. They also secrete lipases, which help to break down fats. Proteases and amylases, which help to break down proteins and carbohydrates, respectively. But today's mission is really to talk about the pancreas as an endocrine gland. And so, specifically, there are places, little spots on the pancreas called the islets of Langerhans, and they produce two different kinds of hormones. The first is insulin, and I'm sure you've all heard of insulin and are at least somewhat aware of what it does. Insulin is secreted by the pancreas when your blood glucose levels are too high, like right after you eat a meal or that sort of thing. And what it does is the insulin stimulates the liver and muscle cells to actually take that glucose out of the blood and store it. Okay. In the muscles, it's just held as glucose, but in the liver, it's actually converted into glycogen and stored for until it's needed later on. The second hormone, of course, is glucagon. And this is a hormone that does just the opposite of insulin. And so these two are doing a balancing kind of effect here. Glucagon is secreted when the blood glucose is low, and it stimulates the breakdown of glycogen in the liver so that the liver will release the glucose molecules and raise the blood sugar level again. Uh, Now, the testes are the gonads that are found in males. They produce a class of hormones called androgens, and the best known example of an androgen is testosterone. This is responsible for stimulating the growth of the penis and the testes during puberty. It's responsible for the development of secondary sex characteristics in males, like facial hair, underarm hair, pubic hair. It prompts the voice box and the vocal cords to enlarge. So, an 11-year-old's boy's voice is very high, whereas a 14-year-old's boy's voice will get much lower. And it also promotes the development of muscles. The counterpart in females are the ovaries, and the ovaries are simply the gonads that are found in females. Two hormones that they produce are estrogen and progesterone. And just like the testes in males, these stimulate the development of the secondary sex characteristics. So, estrogen and progesterone stimulate the growth of the vagina and the uterus. They are responsible for uh, the development of body hair, fat distribution, breast development, and eventually they begin the entire um, uterine and ovarian cycle, responsible for the maturation of eggs and the 28-day or so cycle that women go through from the time they hit puberty until they hit menopause. And this is all controlled by the hormones produced by the ovaries. Next is the thymus gland. This is one that we almost always forget about, but it sits right behind your sternum, your breastbone, right on top of your heart. It's very, very large in children, um, but it doesn't shrink over time, but it doesn't grow as fast as the rest of the body. The thing that happens here is the maturation of T lymphocytes. Now, recall from our discussion of the immune system, T lymphocytes are the ones that fight off viral infections. And this is where we store them in this gland right above the heart. The memory Ts, the cytotoxic or killer Ts, and the helper T cells all mature in the thymus. The thymus also secretes a series of hormones called thymosins that help these T lymphocytes to differentiate, to become memory or plasma or whichever kind of T cell they're going to be. Last but not least on our list of glands is the pineal gland. And this is located in the brain, and it secretes a hormone called melatonin. And melatonin is a hormone that helps to regulate your circadian rhythms, all right, when you sleep and when you wake. All right. It turns out that most teenagers to 20 somethings, so including you guys, tend to be wide awake in the middle of the night and sleep from like 2 or 3 in the morning until noon or so. All right. My son Jack is a bear in the morning and won't go to sleep at night. So he's hitting that stage. And if you're a night owl, that just means that your circadian rhythms are different than somebody who's an early bird. So it turns out that many studies have been done that show that teenagers should be awake and aware and doing things from noonish until 2 or 3 in the morning. However, the world doesn't work that way, and so what do? We start school at 7:30 in the morning when teenagers should be asleep. All right, very foolish, but I'm not really sure what the answer is there. Some school districts have been talking about starting school later, uh, especially the high schools and that sort of thing. But quite frankly, that really does bring up a whole series of other societal issues, and I'm not sure we're going to be successful with that. But anyway, that's the pineal gland, circadian rhythms. So again, we always conclude with a slide on the various systems. The nervous and endocrine systems work together to maintain homeostasis, and they coordinate the activities of the other systems. The brain itself receives sensory input and controls the activity of muscles and other glands. The endocrine system secretes hormones that influence metabolism, growth and development, and homeostasis as well. Okay, so that concludes the third of 3 videos on the endocrine system today. And so I'm about to post these, and our quiz on this stuff will take place on Monday, April the 20th. All right, so you've got a 2-week break from me. God bless you. And, oh, by the way, happy Easter.